Every morning, millions of American parents pour a bowl of cereal and call it breakfast. It's fast, it's easy, and the box says it's fortified with vitamins. But what if that bowl of cereal is doing something to your child's brain that nobody warned you about? What happens in the first 30 minutes after your kid eats cereal before 9 a.m.? And more importantly, what is it doing to their ability to focus, learn, and behave at school? The answers are backed by real neuroscience, and they will change the way you think about breakfast forever. Let's start with what cereal actually is, not what the marketing tells you. Most breakfast cereals sold in the United States are made from highly processed grains that have been stripped of almost all their natural nutrients. The refining process removes fiber, natural vitamins, and minerals. Then synthetic versions are sprayed back on. The result is a food product that looks healthy, but behaves very differently inside the human body. Now, here's where it gets really important for your kids. A child's brain is not a small adult brain. It is an actively developing organ that is exquisitely sensitive to blood sugar fluctuations. Between the ages of 5 and 12, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that controls focus, decision-making, and impulse control, is undergoing critical development. And that developing cortex is directly affected by what goes into a child's stomach before school. So what actually happens in the first 15 minutes after your child eats a bowl of sugary cereal? Within 15 minutes, the refined carbohydrates in the cereal rapidly break down into glucose and flood the bloodstream. This is called a glycemic spike. Blood sugar rises fast, and the pancreas responds by releasing a large burst of insulin. For a child's smaller body, this spike is even more pronounced than it would be in an adult. But here's what most parents don't know. Around 30 minutes later, blood sugar crashes hard. This crash triggers the release of cortisol, the body's stress hormone. Cortisol in a child's brain at 8:30 in the morning directly impairs memory consolidation and attention span. This is the exact moment your child arrives at school, and their brain is already fighting a biochemical battle. A 2019 study from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that children who consumed high glycemic breakfasts showed significantly lower cognitive performance within 2 hours of eating. Lower cognitive performance means slower reading, weaker math processing, and reduced ability to sit still and focus. And this isn't just one bad morning. If this pattern repeats every school day, the effects compound. Let's talk about the sugar, because the numbers on popular kids' cereal boxes are genuinely shocking. Fruit Loops contains 12 grams of sugar per serving. Honey Smacks contains nearly 16 grams. More than half of its weight is sugar. The American Heart Association recommends children under 12 consume no more than 25 grams of added sugar per day. One bowl of cereal with sweetened milk can consume 70% of that entire daily limit before 8 a.m. But sugar isn't the only problem. Let's talk about artificial dyes, because this is where things get very uncomfortable. Many popular kids' cereals in America contain petroleum-derived artificial food dyes, Red 40, Yellow 5, and Blue 1. A landmark study published in The Lancet in 2007 found that artificial food dyes combined with sodium benzoate significantly increased hyperactivity in children. This study was significant enough that the European Union now requires warning labels on foods containing these dyes. In the United States, no such warning label is required. The same cereal is sold without it. Now let's track what happens when a child eats cereal every morning for a full week. By day 3, the body's insulin response has already begun to adapt, and not in a good way. Repeated blood sugar spikes followed by crashes begin to create a pattern of energy instability that the brain starts to depend on. This creates a cycle. Kids crave more sugar throughout the day, feel tired mid-morning, and struggle to regulate emotions. By day 7, studies show measurable changes in gut microbiome diversity, directly tied to mood and cognitive function. The gut-brain axis is one of the most important discoveries in modern neuroscience, and cereal disrupts it directly. Over 90% of the body's serotonin, the neurotransmitter that regulates mood and calm, is produced in the gut. When high-sugar, low-fiber foods dominate the diet, the gut bacteria that produce serotonin precursors begin to decline. The result? Children become more irritable, more anxious, and less resilient to stress, starting at breakfast. Now let's go to the 14-day mark. Because what happens in 2 weeks of daily cereal consumption is something schools and pediatricians rarely discuss. At the 2-week mark, research suggests that dopamine receptor sensitivity in the reward centers of the brain begins to change. This is the same mechanism that makes highly palatable processed foods addictive, and it works on children faster than adults. Kids who eat high-sugar cereal daily at 14 days begin to show a measurable preference bias towards sweet processed foods and away from whole foods. Their taste preferences are being rewired, and most parents have no idea this is happening. Now, we reach the 30-day mark, and this is where the long-term research becomes deeply concerning. A study published in Pediatric Obesity found that children with high breakfast glycemic index scores showed significantly elevated BMI trajectories over 30-day dietary cycles. But the weight issue, while important, isn't the most alarming finding. After 30 days of high-sugar, low-fiber breakfast patterns, markers of systemic low-grade inflammation begin to appear, even in healthy children. Inflammation in the brain, called neuroinflammation, is directly linked to attention disorders, mood instability, and cognitive delays. This does not mean cereal causes ADHD, but it does mean that cereal can amplify and worsen existing neurological vulnerabilities in children. Now let's bust the 4 biggest myths that the cereal industry has spent billions pushing into American households. Myth 1. It's fortified with vitamins, so it must be nutritious. The truth. Synthetic vitamins added to processed foods are absorbed at dramatically lower rates than vitamins found naturally in whole foods. Fortification is a patch on a nutritionally bankrupt product. It does not make it equivalent to real food. Myth 2. It says whole grain on the box, so it must be low in sugar. Whole grain on a cereal box simply means some portion of the grain used is whole. It says nothing about the sugar content. Some of the most popular whole grain cereals in America contain more sugar per gram than a chocolate chip cookie. Myth 3. Kids need carbohydrates for brain energy in the morning. This one is partially true, but critically misapplied. Yes, the brain runs on glucose, but it runs better on slow, steady glucose, not a spike and crash. Eggs, oats, and whole fruit provide sustained glucose release that fuels the brain for 3 to 4 hours, without the crash. Myth 4. A little sugar in the morning is fine. Kids burn it off. Physical activity can help manage blood sugar, but it cannot undo the cortisol surge, the dopamine recalibration, or the neuroinflammatory response that has already been triggered. So what should kids actually eat before 9 a.m.? The science is very clear on this. A breakfast with protein, healthy fats, and fiber creates what nutritional neuroscientists call a stable fuel state for the brain. Eggs provide choline, a critical nutrient for myelin sheath formation and memory consolidation in developing brains. Oats provide beta-glucan, a soluble fiber that feeds the gut bacteria responsible for serotonin production. Berries provide polyphenols and antioxidants that reduce neuroinflammation, directly protecting the developing prefrontal cortex. Within 7 days of switching to a protein-rich, low-glycemic breakfast, research shows measurable improvements in children's attention scores. Teachers report behavioral improvements, parents report calmer mornings, and kids report feeling more alert and less hungry by midday. Now, here's a question worth asking. Why do the most aggressive marketing campaigns in children's food history target breakfast cereal? Because breakfast is a habit, and habits formed in childhood are the hardest to break. The cereal industry spends over $264 million per year marketing directly to children, primarily on digital platforms and TV. The boxes are designed at child eye level in grocery stores. The mascots are designed to trigger dopamine responses in children's reward centers. This is not accidental. It is the result of decades of behavioral science applied in the opposite direction of your child's health. So here is the final, honest verdict on what cereal really does to your kid's brain before 9 a.m. Not all cereals are created equal. Plain oat-based cereals with minimal added sugar, eaten with protein, are significantly different from brightly colored, heavily sweetened cereals. The concern is specifically with high sugar, artificial dye-containing, highly processed cereals, the ones that dominate the kids' aisle. If your child is eating one of those cereals every morning, the brain science says it is worth reconsidering. Not because one bowl will permanently damage your child, it won't, but because patterns repeated 180 times a year, every school morning, accumulate into measurable biological outcomes. The brain your child uses in the classroom, on the sports field, and in their relationships with others is built and rebuilt by food, every single morning. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to be informed. And now, you are. If this video changed the way you think about breakfast, share it with one parent who needs to see this. And if you want to know which specific cereal scored the worst in our nutritional analysis, that video is right here.